Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Zia and I'm leading Women of Wonders Pakistan Barkeley, which is a community to empower women, professional women and entrepreneurs and all women, whether you're working from home or whether you're a housewife. We conduct sessions, we conduct webinars, we have trainings and workshops and lots more to offer. We are resuming our WOW webinars again from today. And the topic for today is very interesting. It's mindset for success. And a young lady will be joining us from US. Her name is Sadia Saifuddin. And let's welcome Sadia.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum, Sadia. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
I'm good too. So, Sadia, introduce yourself. Tell us about your experience studying in UC Berkeley, and you were, mashallah, elected senator, Muslim senator, and student regent as well. And what are you doing these days? And I've seen your, Instagram page where you are sharing lots of career tips and also the interview tips, which are very useful. So, introduce yourself.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Like you said, I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2014, and I studied social welfare there really because I was curious about what are the ways in which our society supports people and doesn't support people. And my work there really informed a lot of my activism on campus as well as off campus as well. So I spent a lot of time in student government. I also worked on policy issues as a regent. I was the first Muslim to serve in that capacity, which was really wonderful and exciting, and was really able to spend my time working on issues that I cared about, such as food insecurity among students. That might be a bit of a surprise or a shock for those of you who are listening in Pakistan, but food insecurity, homelessness is also something that many Americans and many students, particularly in college, face. And so I spent my time trying to solve that problem. After that, I did some management consulting where I really was able to learn more about my analytical skills and being able to get really clear with data and working with clients. And then I was actually recruited to work on the private equity team for the University of California Investment Office. So they manage both the endowment and the pension plan for the university 10 campus system here in California. And I worked in investing there, was able to invest around $1.1 billion across the investments I worked on, which was really cool. And then from there, I joined the tech world. I worked on strategy for about a little less than 3 years, and then recently just joined as a product manager in February. So very exciting. I get to build technology to help higher education institutions with their admissions offices. And then I also started my own company a couple of years ago. We're on a mission to make the college admissions process more accessible and more affordable for everybody. So we work with students and families as they make that transition from high school into college. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, mashallah, amazing, zabardast. So many things you have achieved in such a छोटी सी जो आपकी लाइफ अभी तक है माशाल्लाह, you are so young and you have the whole life in front of you to achieve more, so onwards and upwards inshallah. अच्छा सादिया, ये शेयर कीजिएगा कि do you think is there any difference between the job market or the way the interviews are being conducted in US and in Pakistan? So are there any difference?
Yeah, I would say one thing I would be thinking about is that the skills that are required for people to be successful in a very quickly globalized world are very transferable in both the US and in Pakistan. I think, of course, there are going to be cultural differences at work, in the process, with the people, but we've made very, very great strides. And actually, it was something my mother-in-law was telling me a couple of months ago, how when she was applying for work, she's a working woman, and she is a SVP at a very large financial financial institution here in the US. When she was applying to work in Pakistan for the first time, she got the job, and when she actually said, "Oh, I'm expecting my daughter," they took her job offer away, thinking like, "Oh, you shouldn't be working if you're expecting a baby." And that is so different from like what we see today in terms of like, you know, the financial independence that women have in Pakistan and in the US as well too. And so I think, of course, there will be cultural differences, but the skills that I want to talk about today in the presentation are skills that will be transferable to help you really distinguish yourself, whether you are in the US or in any other country, whether you're in Pakistan or India, particularly because of globalization and multinational corporations and many people who are finding opportunities in those types of companies.
Yes, and also because I think after COVID-19, the remote work is in, and if you are sitting any part of the world, of course, I think the interviews are being conducted online, so the format would be pretty much the same, whether you are living in Pakistan or US or anywhere else in the world. Okay, so Sadia, let's begin. You are conducting a session on mindset for success. So let's start with this. So over to you. And
All
I'll
right,
join
let's
you
do
once
this.
you finish, okay?
Sounds good. And then can you see my screen? All right, okay, here we go. So you can see my screen here. Today, I want to talk a little bit about some skills that anybody can cultivate. It says here, young professionals, but you know what? Youth is in the heart, right? It's in the personality. So if you are just starting your career, whether you are right out of college or whether you're re-entering the workforce after taking care of your family, these are some skills that I think can really help you think about how do you grow in your profession? How do you distinguish yourself from people that you are working with, and really what are the wow factor qualities that companies are looking for in their leadership. I've learned these things over the past couple of years from observing, from being mentored by executives, from just learning myself and being promoted and achieving different levels of experience myself. And I'm really passionate about sharing this with other young people so that they can be successful too. So let's go ahead and dive into the presentations. All right, so talked a little bit about who I was. What are we going to talk about today? First, we're going to talk about how should I be approaching job recruiting? Like, what is the mindset? How should I be thinking about this? The second question is, what skills should I focus on cultivating as a young professional? There's so many things to learn. Maybe I'm feeling overwhelmed. What is something I can sink my teeth into? And then third, how do I start a side hustle or a side project, right? In the US, we call it a side hustle. It's anything that you do on the side that can help you grow your experiences. So we'll talk a little bit about these things. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about the mindset that you need when you are approaching job recruiting. And this is relevant if you are just starting to look for jobs. It's relevant for if you are looking for a new job and making a career change. It's relevant for if you've started your dream job and you're feeling a little overwhelmed, and maybe you're feeling what we call imposter syndrome, feeling like maybe you're in over your head. So the core foundational element that you need here is the growth mindset. Now, the growth mindset is essentially this belief that you have what it takes to level up, to learn the skill that you don't have, to gain a new experience that you may not have had before. And it is the opposite of what we call the fixed mindset, which is this idea that, oh, you're just not good at something. Like, oh, I'm not a math person. Oh, I'm not very good at talking to people. Like, oh, I'm very shy, right? All of those things may be true, but a growth mindset essentially takes that idea and changes it and says, I'm feeling shy right now, but let me find a way to better communicate and to take more risks, maybe socially. Or, I'm not great at public speaking right now, probably because I don't have any practice. Let me try to find situations in which I can practice the skill. Or I haven't really worked that much with math and big data sets stress me out. let me find projects for me to do, for me to better learn this. Like there's something that's making me uncomfortable. Let me find a way to really navigate around it. And this is important because unfortunately, many of us have these ideas drilled into our heads, right? I was very lucky to have parents who basically told me I could do whatever I wanted. Like they never made me feel limited in any way. But unfortunately, many people may not have that same kind of support system. You know, maybe you've been told that you can't do something. Maybe you've had a teacher that has told you like, oh, you know, you should probably stay away from this area. You're probably not going to be successful. How do you unlearn some of those messages and really approach job recruiting from this idea of, okay, you know what, this is a new phase in my life. What do I need to learn to be successful? Let me create a plan for me to learn those things so that I can be successful. And you know, we see that, I see this a lot when I work with young people, like when I just mentor young people when they're going through the interview process, where they'll tell me like, oh, it seems like it's so easy for you to speak and to communicate, and you know, you're a straightforward communicator. I've just had a lot of practice, and that's all it is. There's nothing special about me. There's nothing that I have that you don't, except just years of practice. And that really comes back to the growth mindset. If you feel like you are deficient in some area, don't let that get you down. Just let it be an opportunity for you to say, I'm going to get better at this. And like I mentioned, like when it comes to interviewing, it's all about practice. When it comes to writing killer resumes, it's all about practice. So really try to approach each of the things that you do with the growth mindset. So now that we've talked a little bit about mindset, I want to talk about what skills can you really learn and focus on in these years of your life. And again, these skills are important whether you are a young professional or a seasoned professional. I have worked with seasoned professionals who do not demonstrate any of these things, and their time at a company is limited because of that. And so really just remember, this isn't like, oh, well, you know, I've been working for 10 or 15 years. These don't apply to me. That's totally not the case. We should always be thinking about how do we get better in these areas. So the first area that I would recommend, like the first skill, super important, is to be a critical thinker. And what does that mean? That means to ask hard questions. That means to go back and reevaluate decisions that have already been made. It means to ask why and try to understand, genuinely, sincerely try to understand what the other person is saying. And to also think critically about problems that you can solve, right? I think a lot of times, you know, we come into working for a company and we think that everything that they're doing is the right way of doing something, right? Like I've been there where I come in and I'm like, well, I guess this is how things work. And that's totally not the case. Remember, companies, organizations, they're made up of people, and people are imperfect. And so how can you come in and instead of thinking that everything is the way that it should be and you mold yourself into that mold, think instead about how you can be an influencing factor and bring about positive change. So maybe a company isn't operating on best practices the way it should in that capacity. How do you do the research to be ready to come in and say, hey, I've noticed that these are the things that are concerning and that are slowing us down. How might we as a team solve this problem and move toward a more positive solution? So that's the first thing. And you know, I've spent a little bit of time in Pakistan, obviously not as much as many of you that are listening here, but one thing that I've heard over and over again is that there is a little bit of like a command and control culture. And that comes from like the schooling that you're in, right? Versus here in the West, like you are encouraged to ask questions and you're encouraged to ask why. Sometimes our parents, absolutely, that drives our parents crazy, right? But we're encouraged to like ask questions and be curious here, right? And maybe that's not the culture that you have experienced. But think about how there are smaller ways for you to cultivate this kind of like imaginative and creative and critical thinking in your work. And it's just going to make the quality of your work so much better. You're not going to be somebody that just checks the box. You're going to be somebody that adds a lot of immense value. So that's one thing. That's the first thing that you should be thinking about. The second is attention to detail. And this is something that I learned in my first year working out of college. I thought I was detail oriented until I started working in consulting. And then I was like, oh, apparently I'm not detail oriented, but this is something that's really, really important. Why? Because more often than not, we are communicating online. We are communicating digitally. We have work products that are required of us, and oftentimes our work product or our email speaks to our professionalism more than the in-person interaction, particularly in the time of COVID, right? So think about how all of your emails, all of your slides that you might create, all of the code that you might write, all of the talks you might give, how do you approach all of those with an attention to detail and excellence, and really combing through all of those things over and over again? And again, this might be like a skill you might need to spend more time on in your first few years working, but it is a super important skill. I've worked with execs who don't have this, and I always feel very shocked when I get emails that like grammar doesn't make any sense, like we're missing like punctuation, like maybe there's no subject in the email. These little things, they might seem little, but they make a difference in terms of how you communicate online. So that's another thing to be thinking about. And then of course, how do you focus and minimize distractions, right? So this is like the question of our age when we have TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and WhatsApp and Facebook and TV and our children and our families and the fun things that we do. We have so many things going on in our life. How do we develop focus? How do we minimize distractions? How do we make progress on difficult projects, right, that require all of us? And a lot of the work that I do in my capacity as a product manager is really oriented around research and thinking and structuring problems first in my head and then finding a way to communicate that structure to my stakeholders. That requires a lot of focus. And on a day-to-day basis, I have meetings, I have so many other things that are going on that I can't do that hard thinking, what we call deep work in the weekday, right? Like I can't just squeeze it in the 15 minutes I have in between meetings or 30 minutes or whatever it might be. So what I do is I block off focus time on my calendar. So I have focus time in the mornings and I have focus time in the afternoons for me to just be undisturbed and work and be able to like really put out that creative work and not always reacting to the work that I have or the work that other people require of me. And I don't advocate like working on weekends, but like for me, again, like if I have the ability to, I don't have kids, like I don't have those types of obligations. So if there's something that I really need to accomplish and I need a stretch of time for, I will set aside time on a Saturday or Sunday morning to work on that, right? So again, doesn't mean that you need to do that, but you need to find what works for you in terms of where are the times that I best focus and best do this kind of focused, completely undisturbed work, and then be really religious about guarding that time for yourself. Now, of course, developing a routine. This is, I can't even express to you how important this is. And I will tell you, like the first thing I will tell you about routine is that it is a lifelong process. It is not something that you just stick to forever, right? Your routine changes based on your health, based on your family requirements, based on what's going on in your life, based on whether you have kids or not, whether you have a new job, whether you move. It's okay for routine to change, but the goal of a routine is to keep you anchored and grounded in some sense of reality as all of these changes happen. So for me, that routine is setting up that time in the morning where I don't have any meetings, where I just spend my time clearing my calendar, preparing for those meetings, looking ahead, making sure I'm not falling behind, responding to messages, just spending a little bit of time getting organized, right? And then the other like non-negotiable part of my routine on a daily basis is exercise. Like I have to do it. Like that absolutely cannot be something I don't do. And subhanAllah, I heard someone phrase like routine really beautifully. They said like wake up earlier so that you can do something you can work for yourself before you start your day working for somebody else. And I thought that was really powerful. Like, if you are a morning person and you can wake up earlier to do something in the morning, find that thing that you can do for yourself, so you can work for yourself before you work for other people. And I think the other part of the routine is that, the way that I teach all of my students how to think about routine is in the 4 energies, right? So making sure that you've balanced your physical energy, right? So exercise, eating clean, walking, moving your body, drinking water, all of those things. Balancing your emotional energy, so taking care of like your mental health, making sure that you are doing the inner work you need to do to be the best person you can be for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones. Maybe that's therapy, maybe that's talking to a friend, maybe that's like taking a walk to like manage your stress, right? How do you think about better managing that stress? The third is your intellectual energy, right? So making sure that you have some part of your day that's dedicated to learning. So I have a stack of books staring at me in the face that I'm like trying to read and like slowly get through. And even if it's just 5 minutes, I feel like, okay, today I learned something new. That's really important in terms of routine. And then the last one, and definitely not least, is your spiritual energy. So what do you do to balance your spirituality? What do you do to ground yourself in reality, right? Rather than get sucked into like the career and corporate world. This world of like work will completely dominate your life. Now, how do you still make sure that you have balance and like center what is important for you, whatever that might be, by developing a spiritual practice in your day? So maybe for some people that's meditation. Maybe if you're Muslim, that's like prayer, right? Like maybe it's like spending some time like reading the Quran or like learning something like on the spiritual plane. So just something to think about, because I think it makes it adds to so much value, and it brings a different kind of energy when you do show up to work, when you are a whole person. So one thing to think about. And then last thing is structure. So structure in your day, structure in your communication, structure in your thinking. Those things are so important. And I have met so many people that don't have them. We have all met that person who just goes on and on and on. And at the end of the conversation, you're not really sure what the main point was that they were trying to communicate. So as a young professional, think about how can you start to structure your language and your ideas in a clear and easy to understand way. And maybe that is saying, you know what, I have 3 ideas I'd like to discuss with you all today. First, second, third, right? Or when you're talking to your manager, I learned 2 main things today, like first, second. Direct the listener's ears and their mind toward where you want them to focus on. Remember that less is more. So that's really, really important to think about and start developing from an early time. So really, like, those are some critical skills, right? Which means like we absolutely need to develop these skills. They are non-negotiables. What about skills that are going to differentiate what we call star performers, right? Star performers are people who get promoted. They're the people who get all of the interesting opportunities. They're the people who recruiters reach out to and say, hey, would you be interested in this other role? They're the people that other teams have an eye on to say, hey, have you met this person? Like, this woman or this man, like, they're really solid performer. They'd be a great asset on our team. Those are star performers. And who are box checkers, right? Box checkers are people who are like, I'm gonna do my job 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever, and then that's it. And they're the people who say that's not my job. Quite often, they're just the people who are like trying to do the absolute minimal to check the box, and often expect that they will be rewarded for that, but really end up stuck in their roles for many years without any kind of growth. So what are the things that distinguish these people? So there are these 3 core areas for you to focus on if you are ready for the next step. The first is developing an analytical and logical reasoning mindset, right? So developing curiosity, a comfort with data, understanding what the data means, right? So when you are growing in your career, it's not just being able to use Excel and like VLOOKUPs, right? That's not the point. It's about, okay, that's a tool, but what is this data telling me in terms of what my executives need to know or what my leadership needs to know? And what what recommendations can I make that will really help my company like move its goals forward, right? So this is not just about understanding this like zoomed in version of data. It's about understanding the bigger picture of what data tells us and the power that it brings. This is really, really important. And so I would highly recommend that people get comfortable thinking about trying to take on an analytical project, or think about getting involved in something that will help them like develop the skill. The second is building process and governance, right? It sounds boring, but it's the thing that will put you on the map. Because what building a process or building governance means is that you saw a problem in the way that an organization was operating, and you went in there and you fixed the problem. And you listened to all the stakeholders, you took the best of what everybody was saying, and you created a solution that made everybody's lives easier. And this is a couple of things. First, it helps you become really good at like identifying problems, which we'll talk a little bit about it in the next section, but is critical for being successful, right? All of these entrepreneurs, all these CEOs, how did they get there? They identified a problem and they found a solution to it. So this is a smaller way for you to be able to do that that's just as impactful. So that's the first thing. Second is that it gets you in front of stakeholders. This is one of the big mistakes that professionals make, which is they show up in their team to do their job and there is no cross-functional element involved. They don't interface with other teams. They feel maybe too nervous to ask questions of other teams, whatever it might be. Building a process allows you to get in front of influential members of your organization, and also helps you get better at taking feedback. So I'll give you an example. Before I was a product manager, I led the new product introduction process for my company. We didn't really have a process before, and basically what was happening was we were launching products that weren't aligned with our business recommendations or business priorities. And so what I did was, okay, I went and I sat down and I talked to every single team at the company. I think I talked to like 20 teams, and I met with their leaders and I said, tell me about what's not working. Like, tell me about the ways in which your team does not have the information that they need. Then the next question is, what information do you need, right? Like, and when do you need this information by? So I did this entire discovery process to understand, okay, engineers, solution engineers, product marketing, corporate marketing, finance, legal. I asked all of the teams what information that they needed so that I could create a 1.0 version of this process. And of course, it's constantly a work in progress. There's so many things that you can continue to improve upon, but it allowed me to get in front of those people. And I developed some really great like executive like mentors and sponsors from that process. Like I had people who I had only had these like handful of conversations with who were advocating for me when promotion time came around. So this is a very powerful thing to identify something that's broken and help fix it. And frankly, executives come in to do exactly this job, right? When a new VP of product comes in, they come in, they take a look and they say, here are the things that we need to do from an operational level that need to be improved. So that's one thing. And then lastly, communicating with clarity and confidence. And if you are able to build the ability to have really good structure in your communication, then clarity and confidence will come from that, right? So if you know what it is that you're going to say, it makes it so much easier to actually say it and really like put yourself on the map. So those are some of the 3 steps to be thinking about. Now I want to pivot a little bit and talk about how do I demonstrate my skill or grow my skill through a side project? And the reason this is related is that many of the people that I mentor online or through the Success Company, maybe they want to make a career jump. Maybe they want to switch jobs or careers. Maybe they want to get into a very competitive field. So how can we help them do that? And one of the best ways to do this is to do your own side project, where you can actually demonstrate and learn the skills that are required for the role that you would like to attain. So let's talk a little bit about it. It's simple and complicated at the same time, right? But the first thing is to be observant of the world around you and beyond you, and to think about what kinds of problems like matter to me, and also what are the problems that other people are facing as well. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in, we are so focused on ourselves. We are on our phones, on our laptops, in our own like social circles. Maybe we don't really like interface socially with people of other socioeconomic classes, other schools, other communities, our world is kind of limited. And if we're living in a bubble, we won't be able to identify some of the hard problems. And so that's the first thing, is to really think about observing the world around you and beyond you, and start gathering information and noticing things, right? So that's the first. The second is to identify the market problem and conduct research to verify your hypothesis. So, all right, maybe you have an opinion. So for me, when we started the Success Company, what we were noticing was that there was so much anxiety for parents around the future of their students and their education. And so we said, okay, you know what, let's do a little bit of research. And we just interviewed a number of parents in our community and asked them, how do you think about high school? Do you have other resources that you use? What's your relationship with your counselor? We came up with a research project to really see is this even an area where we can grow our company? Is this an area where we can grow the business? And then from there, we identified some possible solutions. We came up with a couple of pricing models. We came up with a couple of different packages, and we began beta testing. We just put ourselves out on the market and said, okay, let's try this with a small group of people to see if, maybe this is something that we can do. Like maybe is this our right target customer? Is it the right problem? Have we priced and packaged it the right way? Those learnings we would have only gained if we had actually put ourselves out there, and tried. So that's one thing, is like, now do the scary thing of starting and trying something. And then lastly, when it comes to execution, really, it's just about iterating and constantly learning. And I can't tell you how many hats I've worn for the Success Company. I do sales, I do pricing, I do product marketing, I work on social, I do filming, I do all of it, right? I do hiring, I do training, I do the actual coaching itself. You have to do everything. So if you are somebody who is interested in a side project, I would actually highly recommend trying this for everybody. It's just a great way to develop professionally, and also get a better understanding of where you thrive. So maybe you thought that you would really enjoy operations, but actually once you started the work, you realized that you love marketing, right? So allow yourself the flexibility to try something new and to explore, and to be okay making mistakes, right? What I love about communities like Wow PK, being online, right? Is that you have this supportive community of people who want to learn and grow with you, and you have other women that are there to support you. So use resources like this to constantly learn and ask questions and build a community around you. So that's what I had today. I know that was just a ton of questions, a ton of information. So I would love to take questions and see reactions, and see how I can be of service. So thank you again for having me. It's been really wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much, Sadia, for an amazing session. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, thank you. I'm really, this was really fun. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. We have, I think, a few questions because people are now joining us. How do you define success or a successful life?
This question, obviously everybody defines it differently. For me, it's knowing that I have used every single ounce of talent and skill that I have been given, that I have cultivated. I define success as taking risks and learning from those risks. And also I'm a spiritual person, my faith is really important to me. So I really define success on if I'm able to fulfill the requirement that the requirements and expectations that God has of me, and the way that I interact and give back in this world. And so those are some of the ways that I think about defining a successful life.
Okay, great. Okay, so many people fluctuate between being star performer and a box checker. Can you be a star performer all the time? Is it realistic?
That's a great question. So the question is it realistic to be a star performer all the time? No, totally. It's not realistic. You always, the usual trajectory is that you go from being a box checker to a star performer, ideally, right? And so that should be the natural trajectory. Now, life happens, right? Like you have to make decisions that will optimize your life. So for example, maybe you've been working really hard for a long time and you want to maybe slow it down a little bit. You want to do the requirements of your job. Maybe it's not a goal for you to grow. Maybe you want to kind of stay in the role that you're at and you're comfortable there. Maybe you have a family or whatever, you have a side project going, whatever it might be. That's fine too, right? This isn't to say that you need to be a star performer your whole life, but it is to say if you plan on growing, you have to move beyond the box checking area and move into the star performing category.
Yes, absolutely, you're right. Because if you are a star performer all the time, then it means that you are a perfectionist. And I think you have to be flexible when you want to grow. You need to try out new things and come out of your comfort zone. And, like you said, you have to be a risk taker. So sometimes you take the initiative from the front. Sometimes you let the people take the initiative and you guide and you take a back seat, but still your guidance is there. So I think both are correct. You do fluctuate in between being a star performer and being box checker, right?
Absolutely. And I love what you said. Actually, I'm reminded of a book called Multipliers, which is all about leadership and the kind of leaders that allow other people to shine. And so the question that I would pose to all of you, especially those of you that are maybe more seasoned professionals, are, okay, like maybe you grew from being a box checker to a star performer. How do you now make your team star performers, right? The people that you work with, how do you make them those like high growth individuals and high growth professionals, right? So I'd highly recommend that book. Is a really good one.
Yeah, that's a leadership quality as well. So okay, this question is very genuine, and a lot of our women face the same thing, or of course men as well. How do you say no if something is beyond your limit, or something you don't really want to do, but you want to keep keep intact in the relationship intact, the professional relationship intact, but yet you don't want to do it for any reason, and you want to say no? Then what is the professional way to say no so that your relationship is also intact and you have a room to be friends again, or develop the collaboration or whatever?
Oh, I love this question. The question is, how do you say no without burning bridges, essentially, right?
True.
No does not have to be a toxic thing. Like, so much of what we say is not what we say, but how we deliver it, right? So if you are going to say no, there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can say, thank you so much for thinking of me. I don't have capacity right now for this project, but maybe let's check back in a couple of months when I'm doing planning for the next quarter or whatever, however your company structures it, right? Another way to say no is to say, again, like thank you so much for the opportunity. Like, I wish I had bandwidth right now, but I can share this. So like, one strategy I use when I'm saying no is I try to be helpful in some other small way. So maybe I can't say yes to specifically what that person is asking, but I can send them an article, or I can direct them to somebody else that can be more helpful. Like, I can give them something else that is minimal effort for me, but still shows them that I want to be helpful, right? So, and sometimes you can just say, oh, I wish I could be helpful. I just don't think I'm the right person for this job, but thank you for thinking of me. Again, delivering it with grace and kindness and patience, and you won't burn bridges in that process, hopefully.
Great. So talking about it further, how do you deal with the difficult people at work? It's quite similar to I just asked. It's like a part 2 of that question. So how do you deal with the difficult people? Because when you're in a professional setup or in a professional network, you get to meet a lot of people, and they are a mixed breed. So some are very helpful, some are very helpful on your face, and some are like your buddies, but actually they are not. And some are genuinely good people. So how do you differentiate between them? Is there any magic formula? And also, what is a professional way of dealing with the difficult people in your network?
Totally. So how do you deal with difficult people? I also actually, I did I think I posted something on my Instagram about this a couple of months ago. It's a really good question. So the first thing is to remember that like not everybody needs to be your friend. So like you're not at work to make friends, right? If you find friends, if you get to know people and cultivate that relationship and slowly build that trust with people at work, keyword slowly, then that's one thing. But don't feel like you need to go to work to like be best friends with everybody. It's okay to keep those kind of relationships separate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when someone is being difficult, usually there's some kind of like underlying problem or underlying tension, right? Maybe they don't feel valued in their role. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe they are maybe they feel like they can't do this job. Maybe they're feeling insecure. Maybe there's something personal going on in their life, right? Like usually when someone is being difficult, they're not, hopefully they're not being difficult for the sake of being difficult. There's something going on, right? So in this situation, if it's a work-related topic, I really try to like approach that person and try to just like name the problem. Like I try to say, you know, it sounds like you're a little overwhelmed right now, right? Or it sounds like you might need a little bit of support right now. Like it looks like you're doing double time right now. That must be stressful. Like learning to kind of identify the emotions that other people are experiencing and then naming them and mirroring them makes the other person feel seen. And that is the problem, is that we don't really see one another at work, and we bring these like old ideas of like socialization into the workplace, the things that we were taught in grade school. That's like the same way we act in our workplace. That's not emotional intelligence, right? So that's not to say that you need to be everybody's therapist. I'm not saying that. Like there are boundaries obviously at work, but what I mean is that instead of like immediately branding somebody as difficult, I really try, and it is hard, I really try to understand like, why is this person behaving the way that they are, right? And then if they continue to behave that way and there's no solution, right, I try to find a workaround. I try to like go around, right? If it's really, really bad, then I try to share some like, you know, feedback with their manager to say, hey, it's actually getting kind of difficult to work with this person. Here are some things that I think they could do better. But if you are still on that step one, where you're trying to get to understand the problem, then I would say instead of relying on that person for a solution, I would actually present the solution and make them think that it's their idea. So like if they're being a blocker for a project that you're working on, I would come up with a solution and I would say, hey, so actually I was thinking like one way we could make your life easier could be to do it this way. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think this could be helpful? Like I ask like leading questions that will make that person actually think about the idea as a way to make their life better, rather than like, oh, it's my idea, it's a great one, like we should do this. So there's a lot of just sort of like mind Jedi tricks that you can use to make yourself more effective. But ultimately at the heart of it is empathy and asking questions and being patient through the process.
Great. Okay. So you talked about focus. How much do you think is important for a woman to, you know, keep her mental wellness or mental well-being in check? Because mental health is essentially very important to keep that focus. Whether it's about the work or whether it's about anything related to if you're cooking or taking care of your children or managing house or managing a product or business, or even if you're an entrepreneur. So have you ever thought about or spoke about, I should rather say, how much mental health is important for a woman to have her focus and to have her productivity at the threshold level?
Absolutely, absolutely. So how do we prioritize mental health as a critical component of our success, like in the career world? And, you know, I'm like streaming here on Instagram as well too. And I see people ask that question too, of like, how do I step away and like find a better way to kind of come back to
You can take those questions as well.
No,
I
it's
can't see
same
them.
topic. Yeah, sure. Well, we can take them at the end, and we're going to do Wow PK questions first, of course. But the reason I mentioned that is because it's like top of mind for everybody, right? Like, how do we live in like a stressful world? Like, this is a universal experience. Like, women in Pakistan are experiencing it. Women in the US are experiencing it. I think we all have to identify what our boundaries are. Like, we have to identify, like, we can't be living in this world where women are only giving and never taking anything. And it is a beautiful thing to see, especially moms. Like, I see moms do this all the time, like, who only give and never expect anything in return. But what ends up happening is that they start to feel a little resentful. They feel like they can't speak up and say, these are the things for me. And so as women, we need to rewrite that script, number one, individually, to say that we deserve to be well and healthy and happy, not just so that we can help other people, but because we just deserve to be happy, right? We deserve to be healthy and happy. And then from there, once you've rewritten that script, find out what that time is in your day to do that, right? So maybe it's waking up a little earlier before your kids get up or before work starts. Or maybe it's like having your partner, your husband, or your nanny, or whomever, maybe you have some support at home, be the people that are going to like take care of like the kids or take care of the house situation while you go and handle something else. For me, it was like a massive turning point in my life when I was actually able to pay somebody to come and like clean my house like every couple of weeks so that I could spend more time on my business, on my work, just drinking a cup of tea and not having to like do extra work. So how can you think of what resources are available to you, right? And again, not to say that that's what you need to do for everybody, but think critically, like be creative. Like, what are the resources available to you, and how do you find moments in your day to do that? So for me, like, after this, like, I'm going to like take a walk around the block. I'm going to pick up a coffee, and then I'm going to come back and like start the rest of my meetings, right? That hour, that's okay. I'm still producing great quality work. I'm doing a live this morning. I have meetings today. I have a business to run, and I can do all of that because I took a moment for myself, right? So just push yourself to prioritize it, and also I really encourage you to surround yourself with other women who also help reinforce that. So I remember like at one point I had pushed myself so much that like I injured my back. It was like right before Ramadan. So all of Ramadan I was dealing with the back and my neck injury. And it was so painful to even just think. Like it was so painful that it was hard to like form words. And like I told my friends about it, and one of my friends like dropped off like a little care package like after work one day, which had like some like, you know, scented soaps and a candle and a hand mask, and just said like, this is a reminder for you to slow down, right? Having people in your life that support you in that way makes the greatest difference, so that you don't feel like you're in this mental health like journey all by yourself.
Thank you so much, Sadia. Are there any other questions on your Instagram? Because I can't see them. This is from Sharon. She says, it is so important to take a break from this bubble to do some creative. I think she means, the continuous effort that you are putting in for your work, or maybe, your personal branding on social media and everything that you need to do now in 2021 and in this age and this time. So I think she meant that you need to have that creativity spark still going on, whether if you like painting, if you like writing, or anything that is closer to your heart, you should take out time for it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Sharon.
absolutely. Absolutely. And Sharon, I love that you mentioned that, because one of my Instagram videos that's going up in the next few days is about what do you do when you start to feel disembodied, right? Like when many of us work behind a computer screen, we can start to feel disconnected from our bodies, right? So like what I do is I go in my yard and I pull weeds, and it's like I garden. Like I love to garden. That's like my big passion. My creative like exercise is gardening, right? So find that thing that's like separate from your work that makes you feel like you're in your body, and your work will benefit as a result of that as well.
Yeah, it energizes you, whether it's gardening, anything that you like, your hobby, your passion, whatever. It actually gives you that feeling of self-satisfaction, self-achievement, and, relaxation, and you are sane again, So you need to take out time. You need to have a me time as well. That's very important.
Exactly. Okay. Me time. That's important.
Okay, Sadia, once again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, because here in Pakistan, it's the night time and it's early morning at your end. You are here from US. Thank you
Yes.
for taking out time, because I know it was at that time of the day when you are, busy in meetings and, planning the day for the day and everything. So thank you so much for sharing such amazing tips with the WowPK followers and everyone who is watching us on different channels. We are live on our YouTube channel. We are live on our Facebook channel. And we also have a Facebook group for women, which is Women of Wonders Pakistan. So we are live on it as well. And we would like to see more of your videos on your Instagram. And I would like you, before I wind up, I would like you to share your, your links, your social links, where you can get connected with with our,
Sure.
with your viewers, so that if there are any questions, they can, contact you directly over there as well.
Sure, absolutely. So I can, do I just put it in the private chat? Is that where I can put my social link?
Um,
Or in
you
the
can,
comments
yes, you
maybe?
can. I'll write it here so that I can share it as a banner.
Sure. Okay, yeah. So my Instagram is at sadia.saifuddin. I post career tips, job interview tips. I do lives. I answer questions. If you are going through a recruiting process and you need a little bit of support or advice, like I respond to my DMs. So I'm really accessible. So definitely check me out at Instagram.com/Sadia Saifuddin, Sadia.Saifuddin. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this important work that you're doing. This is so critical. I really look up to you, and I love that you're starting a movement. And I feel very proud, and I feel very humbled and grateful that you would have me on. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope we can do more of these.
Inshallah. Thank you so much once again, Sadia. Have a very productive and a very great day from all of us.
Thank
Okay?
you. Thank you.
Take
Take
care.
care. Good night.
Good
Assalamualaikum.
night. Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam.